Welcome to this presentation brought to you by the Herefordshire Regimental Museum. This presentation will look at First World War photographs and some of the information which you may be able to get from them. The first thing you need to do, though, is to know a little bit of the history of the unit which you think the photograph might belong to. Also to know some of the badges that that unit was wearing and when they wore them. You also need some general information about the different types of equipment that the British Army wore during the First World War. Photographs can come in great variation of conditions, as shown here, often in a poor condition. Although computer programs can restore some of the detail, they will never be able to reconstruct faces which are missing and the finer detail. It is everyone's ambition to identify the individual featured in photographs so that we could put a name to the face. Some individuals will always remain anonymous. It would be almost impossible to identify the individual featured in this photograph. We know he's a Herefordshire Regimental soldier, although there are no cap badges or any other indications showing. You might be able to recognise the unit that someone belongs to. This soldier is clearly a member of the Herefordshire Regiment, a corporal, although looking at his second tape, it looks as though it has recently been sewn on, so perhaps a recently promoted corporal. But again, there is no indication of who the subject is. If you look at photographs, you might be able to get a clue as to the identity of the unit or the location that it was taken, possibly even the date it was taken. And here are some examples. Photographers generally put their name and sometimes their location on the photographs. And here you can see some examples of those, where they have been printed on the negatives, printed on the card, or embossed on the photographs. So if we look at this information in a little more detail, we can see that we can work out which unit was at that location during which dates. So already we have a clue as to which unit the photograph is of. Here you can see group photographs with the photographer's name embossed on them. But a word of warning here, the bottom photograph is embossed with a photographer from Hereford. However, the photographers often followed the units around. They took the photographs and then went back to their studios to develop and print them. So whereas they may have been developed and printed in Hereford, they may not have been taken in Hereford. Also look on the back of the photographs. There may be some additional clues there. The top card here shows the date 1917. It also is printed in French and English, so was probably taken in France. The bottom card there, printed by F. Priest, photographer Hereford, has written on it, Herbert, April 1918. So we know it was taken in April 1918. What we haven't been able to identify is whether Herbert was his Christian name or surname. So the subject of the photograph remains to a degree anonymous. This is an interesting photograph, as it is clearly a soldier of the Herefordshire Regiment. But if you look at his shoulder title, it is RDC, the Royal Defence Corps, meaning that this individual was a member of the Herefordshire Regiment Supplementary Company, a company of soldiers formed in late 1914 of old soldiers who were unfit for frontline duties, but could undertake home defence duties and became guards at prison of war camps and at key point locations. If you know the history of the unit, it can fit with the uniform which are being worn. The 1st Battalion, the Herefordshire Regiment, served in the Middle East from July 1915 to July 1918. These soldiers, who we all know are Herefordshire Regimental soldiers, are wearing the khaki drill uniform, which was worn during that period. The more common khaki uniform is seen in lots of photographs. The photograph on the left here, the soldier is wearing the 1902 pattern service dress. It has pleats in the pockets and shoulder reinforcing pads. This was replaced by a 1914 wartime service dress, which was cheaper, easier, and quicker to make. It had no pleats on the pockets and no reinforcing pads. Although the 1902 pattern service dress was worn throughout the war, if a soldier is wearing the new pattern service dress, then it must have been taken 1915 or later. It's also possible to look at the belts. A wide variety of belts were worn for photographs during the First World War. The most common was the leather belt with the buckle, and this was worn in 1914 and features in many photographs. The leather belt with the snake type fastener was introduced in late 1914. So again, if that snake belt features in a photograph, it must have been taken after September 1914. The web belt, the broad web belt, was part of the full webbing equipment, which was introduced in 1908. Although generally it didn't start being worn and wasn't worn as a rule on its own as a belt until about halfway through the First World War. Knowing the badges of the unit also can give clues. The Herefordshire Regiment, between 1908 and 1915, the officers wore the City Coat of Arms cap badge, as shown on the left here. After 1915, they wore the Herefordshire Lion, as shown on the right. So again, photographs can be dated. When the Territorial Force was formed in 1908, it had no obligation to serve overseas, but individuals could volunteer to serve overseas and wore the Imperial Service Badge, as shown here. It was worn up until the end of 1914 and into early 1915. So again, if individuals are seen wearing this badge, then the photograph is prior to early 1915. We know that the 1st Battalion served in the Middle East. When they first went to the Middle East and served in Gallipoli, and for their first few months in Egypt on their withdrawal from Gallipoli, they wore an identification flash on their epaulettes, as shown here. This was of green and black. So again, the photograph can be dated from this. There are also army badges which can help date photographs. These photographs here show individuals wearing the wound stripe. This was a brass strip badge about 3 inches long, which was worn on the lower left-hand cuff. One stripe equaled one wound, and it could be worn up to 3 times. But these individuals wearing that wound stripe means they must have been wounded. They have returned to service and are wearing that wound stripe. So it is later in the war. The photograph on the right also shows the soldier there wearing a good conduct stripe, the upturned chevron. So again, that soldier has several years service in. And it's possible that that photograph is taken at Parkhall Camp in Oswestry of a unit being formed up after injury, awaiting posting to a unit. If we know which unit the regiment served with, this can also give clues. Here we can see 2 soldiers wearing the checkerboard shoulder flash of the 34th Division. The Herefordshire Regiment only joined the 34th Division in July 1918. So we know that these photographs were taken later on in the war after that date, possibly after the end of the war when they had time and they wanted their wartime service recorded, so they had their photographs taken. This is further confirmed by what appears to be the individuals wearing medal ribbons. The soldier on the right is Sergeant Harper from Leinster, who was awarded the Croix de Guerre, and it looks there to be the Croix de Guerre medal ribbon he is wearing. The sergeant on the left looks to be wearing the ribbon of the 1415 Star. So both of these facts further confirm the theory that these photographs were taken later on, possibly after the end of the war. One of the other army badges which gives a clue are these upturned chevrons worn on the right cuff. These were overseas service stripes, and 1 stripe was awarded for each year of overseas service. So you can see there the sergeant has 3 years of overseas service. The bridegroom in the middle, and don't they all look happy, has got 4 stripes. And again, the sergeant on the right, which is the same sergeant as the one on the left. And again, it's interesting that you can identify the individual as being the same in the 2 photographs, although there is no written clues to that. Also, if you see soldiers wearing the steel helmet, these photographs must have been taken after May 16. And here Lieutenant Bushell of the Herefordshire Regiment is wearing his steel helmet in the Middle East in 1916. You can also look at the equipment which the individuals have in the photograph. And here you can see a group of men with the Lee Metford, the longley rifle, which was only issued to units in the UK. The more familiar short magazine Lee Enfield, as shown in the bottom picture there, was issued to troops on operations. But if we look at this group of photographs, you can see the center of the photograph by the soldier kneeling, the number there, 246. I mentioned earlier on that photographers moved around the camps taking photographs. And here a photographer has taken that photograph with the number 246, told those soldiers, when you come into the shop, you want print number 246. So it's a way of him identifying which photograph to give to those individuals. And again, on this photograph, there's a very clear X above the center soldier in the back row. This was clearly his photograph. Unfortunately, we have no idea which unit he was from or what his name was from that photograph. However, from the weapons, it's clear that it was a UK-based unit. I'd always thought that the hills in the background looked rather like the Malvern Hills, but there was no proof of this until we came across another photograph, the one showed below here. To me, the hill in the background is the same one. On the photograph is printed number 1 platoon, 3rd, 1st Herefords. So we now know that the group photograph is the 3rd, 1st Herefords, a UK-based unit, which accounts for why they have the longley rifles. Also on the back of that photograph is written Pulbrook Common, Malvern. So my hunch about it being the Malvern Hills is probably correct. This is another photograph which we've had some luck with. It's a well-known photograph of the Herefords in billets in probably Northampton, we thought. Then a photograph was given to the museum, the same photograph, but on the back it was written and addressed to someone in Hereford, but it included the soldier's address, which said that he was staying billeted in Althorpe Road in Northampton. Quite clearly from the photograph, you can see that it is 24. So is it 24 Althorpe Road? The benefits of Google Earth, we're able to look up and find 24 Althorpe Street in Northampton. And there you can see on the photograph there, as it looks now, and it's quite clear that it is the same house. So a partial mystery has been solved in that we now know where that photograph was taken, but we still don't know who any of the individuals are in it and probably will not know. I hope you have enjoyed this short presentation. Please subscribe to and like the Herefordshire Regiment Museum's channel and press the bell icon to get new video updates and notifications. Also check out the links below for the latest museum news.